Hi, this is Deboki. Today I'm going to be doing another recent romance reading rundown. I've been doing a lot of ebook reading recently, and when I do a lot more ebook reading, I tend to do a lot more romance reading, and it's just been really nice while I've been moving to have just like, you know, the comfort and familiarity of romance novels to turn to. I also decided I wanted to give Kindle Unlimited a shot. I only have a few books from Kindle Unlimited on here, and I think it's just because I've been finding the quality there to be very varied, and I haven't quite decided whether I'm going to stick with it. So for the rundown I'm going to be doing today, I am actually going to be doing this in order from least favorite to most favorite book, just because there are a few books I wasn't into, but I wanted to end on a good note because I have found some new authors who I'm really in love with. So the first book I'm going to be talking about is Angel's Blood by Nalini Singh. This is the first in her Guild Hunter series, and it's set in this world where there are like vampires and archangels who make vampires, and then vampire hunters who hunt the vampires when they go berserk. This book is about vampire hunter Helen Devereaux, who gets called in by Archangel Raphael. He's like, I guess, in charge of the New York angelic precinct or something. Basically, another archangel has gone berserk, and Raphael needs Elena to come in and find the murderous rampaging angel, which to me sounded like an amazing premise for a book. Elena and Raphael are of course strangely attracted to each other in a way that also kind of repulses them because there are implications for them and their kind, I guess. As I mentioned, I thought the premise of this book sounded really strange and awesome and exciting. I like the idea of a world that has all these bizarre things happening in it, archangels that are in charge of cities, archangels that are going crazy, vampire hunters. All of that sounded really good. I just didn't like this book. And I think what I've decided is that I'm just not a Nalini Singh reader, which is a bummer to me. I was hoping to really enjoy her books because a lot of people love them. She's very popular. She sells incredibly well. And I've tried to read another one of her series before. I think it was the Psy series, and I also just had a really hard time getting into that one. I think the worlds that she builds are really compelling. I just don't like the stories that she's actually telling in them. And there's probably a specific thing that I'm not liking, but I haven't pinpointed what it is that I'm not into with her stories yet. There's just something about the way that she describes like maybe lust in particular that I don't like. I don't know, this is very vague and it's almost kind of lazy, and I just haven't really put in the work to figure out what it is about her books that aren't clicking with me, so I'm sorry for that. There's a supporting cast in this book that I really like the idea of. They're super powerful, like old archangels in here that are like, have been around for millennia, it seems like. So I like so many of the ideas in the book. They just don't come together for me. So this isn't a series that I'm gonna stick with unless someone comes up with a really compelling reason. Like if you tell me that the second book is like a bajillion times better than the first, I might give it a chance, but I just don't think her books are for me. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Tycoon, and this was written by Molly O'Keefe. This is the first in the King family series, which is actually, I think each book in that series is written by a different author. I found this book off of Kindle Unlimited, and it sounded intriguing. The heroine is named Veronica King. She is the daughter of this really super wealthy but kind of dickish businessman named Hank King. Her father has just died, and his business has been taken over by Clayton Rake, who is actually Veronica's ex-fiance, who on the day of their engagement party, she had found out that he had only started dating her for business purposes, basically so that he could take over the family business. So understandably, she was heartbroken and broke off that engagement. Veronica obviously didn't care for her dad. He was in part of the reason why Clayton was going to make this whole business slash marriage decision. So she only comes back to his funeral for her sibling's sake. But while she's back there, she gets drawn back into Clayton's orbit when he proposes that, you know, they actually should get married, but states outright that he thinks they should do it for business purposes. The writing in this book was kind of just okay, but what ultimately disappointed me was that Veronica and Clayton could have been these really interesting characters dealing with, you know, different sides of the same heartbreak, but their relationship just wasn't given that much depth. When we first meet them at their fateful engagement party, they had been dating for 6 months, and the entirety of the relationship as it's presented to us is as one that's based entirely on orgasms. And for some reason, I'm supposed to feel bad that this relationship didn't pan out. To her credit, Veronica, like a few years later, seems to have matured a little bit and is like, hey, maybe we should get to know a few more things about each other. But then all she does is learn like 2 to 3 more facts about him, and she decides that like, cool, that's enough, we're good now. I think this book probably should have been a little bit longer so that like a lot of that missing information could have been filled out more, and I think their relationship could have evolved a bit more. It was like they went from like 60 to 0 back to 60 again, and that was just really weird, and it just didn't really ring true for me. Okay, next book is The Ruin of a Rake by Sebastian. This is a male-male historical romance set in kind of like Regency era, I think, England. And one of the main characters is Lord Courtney. He is this Casanova type, gets into all these scandals around the continent, but his reputation is starting to catch up to him. A book has been published recently that has a character based in part on him, or based largely on him, and people have connected the dots and realized like these are the things that he's gotten up to. And usually that wouldn't bother him, but now he's not being allowed to see his nephew because people are scandalized by him. Our other hero is Julian Medlock, who is a very, very, very proper, super follows the rules kind of accountant, I think, who is basically recruited by his sister, who is friends with Lord Courtney, to help Courtney improve his image, to basically rehabilitate him into society so that Lord Courtney can see his nephew again. Obviously, neither of them are thrilled with this arrangement. Courtney thinks that Medlock is super stuck up. Medlock thinks Courtney is just kind of a playboy. This book reminded me a little bit of Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. Obviously there are some pretty significant differences to them, but I think Lord Courtney reminds me a lot of the main character from Gentleman's Guide, in the sense that they're like, you know, they're very okay with having a scandalous reputation. They're pretty chill with like just doing what they want, in part because they have the privilege to do so, up until when they're not okay with it anymore. And underneath all of those layers of selfishness that I think defines both of those characters is a good heart, which makes them ultimately much more redeemable than, you know, someone who's just fucking around for the sake of it. One of my favorite parts about this book is a reveal that I'm not gonna go into obviously here, but when you get to that reveal, it really changes your reading of the dynamic between the two men, and it's one of the few times where I feel like a twist has been like executed really well, where yeah, it's not just for the fun of it, it actually introduces new ideas about what the relationship would look like. And though the romance was paced a little bit faster than I would have liked, I liked reading how their overall relationship evolved over the course of the book and how the two characters opened up to each other. The next book that I'm going to be talking about is one that a lot of you have probably heard of. This is The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang, and this book is about Stella Lane, who is an economist who's worried that her Asperger's is getting in the way of her dating potential. So she hires this escort named Michael Fan to basically help her kind of like figure out the physical side of relationships. Obviously, the two start out as client-escort relationship, but quickly discover each on their own that they want more from the parameters that they've laid out for themselves. This book has had a lot of hype around it, and I think it's in part because of the representation it adds to the romance genre. There are 2 Asian Americans in this book. One of them is mixed race. There's also a woman in it who has Asperger's, and I really liked how Hoang integrated their culture in the books. I think she understands that part of showing people's cultures, it's not just saying, oh, they're Asian, it's showing things like the way they interact with their families. I think a lot of lazier writers try to refer to like physical descriptors and stuff like that to just kind of, I don't know, bluntly do the work, but showing how people interact with each other reveals a lot about their cultural background a lot more deeply. So I really enjoyed that part of her book. I liked watching them be together, I just didn't like watching them get there. It just felt a little bit like insta soulmates in a book where that's not really a thing. But despite that one aspect of the story, which you could argue is a big aspect in a romance novel, but yeah, despite that, I will say that I enjoyed this book overall. I thought it was really sweet, and I thought it was really well done, and so I'm really excited to see where Hoang goes in her next book, because I think it's worth a lot of the praise that it's been getting. The next book I'm going to be talking about is Wicked in the Wallflower by Sarah MacLean. This book is the first book in her new series, The Bare Knuckle Bastards, and this series is going to be following, I think, these siblings who all share the same dad. They're all bastards, so there's 3 of them who are bastard sons of the same shitty duke, and then there's also a daughter who is technically the duke's legitimate daughter, but might not actually be. So the premise of this series sounds really exciting, and I've said before that Sarah MacLean is one of my favorite romance authors. In this book, the heroine is Lady Felicity Faircloth. She is a young woman with a passion for picking locks, but who also needs to get a husband. Enter Devil, who's one of the 3 bastard sons, who offers to help her get a husband, to actually specifically marry this one duke in particular, but he is secretly ensnaring her in his own plan for revenge, which then of course becomes complicated for him when he realizes A, he probably shouldn't be doing that, and B, that he shouldn't be doing that to her because he loves her. I'm getting to a strange place with Sarah MacLean. I love her books, I love her characters, I love the hijinks they get up to, I love all the stories that she tells. So in that sense, this book lived up to everything that I expect from her. Felicity and Devil have fantastic chemistry. I think their banter in this book is some of my favorite banter that MacLean has written. So there's a lot going for the book, but I also feel like I've read it from her before. In fact, I'm getting to a point where I feel like she's kind of been writing the same 3 or 4 books over again. I feel like I've read this book from her before because it reminds me of a book from her first series, and then another book from her second series, and then another book from her third series. And that's something that I've just noticed across a lot of her books, that it kind of feels like each series is the same 3 or 4 books iterated again with new characters. It's not just that she has the same pacing going on, it's that she has sort of like a template for like, this is the type of girl, this is the type of guy, and this is what's going to happen, this is how like she's going to save the day. Like, this is the one where the Wallflower gets wrapped up in the rogue's revenge plan and then ultimately ends up saving the day. And it's fine. It's good. It's actually really good. Like, and she's so good at detailing a lot of historical aspects of it and intertwining them to produce like really entertaining comedic scenes, but also really great romantic scenes. Like, it all works together really well. I'm just not surprised when I read any of her books anymore, and I'm starting to get a little bit bored. Like, I just want something a little bit different. In the most entitled version of myself as a reader, I would love if she would write, I don't know, in just like a different era or something to just mix it up a little bit so that the books start feeling a little bit different. But obviously she is a successful writer for a reason, so she should not be changing her plans for me. I will say that I hope that the rest of her series will introduce some new dynamics. I'm really fascinated by this underlying 3 bastard son and the 1 illegitimate daughter thing going on. So the next book I'm going to be talking about is Heels Overhead by Elise Springer. This is a male-male romance. It is a contemporary one set in the diving world. So the book is based around Jeremy Reeves, who is a superstar diver who is also not ready to be open about his sexuality. In comes Brandon Evans, a new diver who's come to train with Jeremy, and they are basically polar opposites, where Jeremy is super focused and driven, Brandon is not, and Brandon's also not afraid of his sexuality. He's not afraid of being open about it. The book follows them over 2 years as Jeremy prepares for the Olympics, and Brandon goes from being a novice but talented diver to actually a pretty decent one. This was such a sweet romance between 2 very opposite personalities. Because the book covers 2 years worth of shifting dynamics, you get really realistic changes in their relationship as they go from, you know, teammates who don't really like each other to reluctant friends to, you know, something a little bit more but still feel the tension. I think Jeremy is probably one of my favorite recent romance characters because he has this hyper focus on his sport and his drive to be like the best at it, and I am nowhere near Olympic level in anything, but I just found that tunnel vision to be maybe a bit too relatable, but I just really enjoyed reading it because a lot of the tension that he has with Brandon as well as with his other friends who he's kind of grown up with in diving, I just really liked seeing how he evolved in his understanding of those dynamics as he started having to address his own kind of limitations because of his ambition. This is the first book by Elise Springer that I've read, and I really loved it, so I'm excited to read more. I'm also really excited because I've seen that some of the books that she has out there feature ace, lesbian, and bi characters, which I haven't seen at as much of in romance, so I'm really excited to see how she handles that in her other books. So my next wrap up is actually going to be 3 books by the same author. The first is The Wall of Winnipeg and Me, the second is Kulti, the third is From Lukov with Love. So The Wall of Winnipeg is about Vanessa Mazur. She's been the assistant to this famous football player named Aiden Graves, who barely acknowledges her. And Vanessa is over it, she's ready to move on, so she quits her job, only to have Aiden come back to her like a few weeks later and offer like this insane deal that is both awful but also too good to be true. The second book that I'm going to be talking about, Kulti, I think it's Kulti, I don't know how to pronounce it, I'm sorry. So this is about Sal Casillas. She is a professional soccer player who has been idolizing this German soccer player named Rainer Kulti ever since she was little, basically. And he has now come to coach her team, and she discovers that he's an asshole. The last book, From Lukov with Love, is about Jasmine Santos, who is a figure skater who is a little bit disappointed in the trajectory of her career. She gets one last chance in the form of Ivan Lukov, who she doesn't like, but who is also good enough that she's basically willing to consider partnering with him. These books were all written by Mariana Zapata. The first one that I read was The Wall of Winnipeg and Me, and I didn't really know what to expect when I went in. So it turns out that Zapata is the queen of slow burn. Like, not just slow burn, like slow burn. In a lot of romance novels, you hit the 50% mark and there's probably been at least a kiss, maybe more, like there's been a moment or like 10. With Zapata's books, with all 3 of them, I think you hit the 50% mark and you were lucky if like their fingers brushed against each other or something. And I didn't know that when I was like starting out, so when I read the first book I was like, oh my god, how am I so close to the end and it's like still not clear to me, like, are they getting together? Like, is this actually a romance novel? But of course it is, and it's all really amazing and it pays off so well. This change of pace was actually really refreshing to me. I have a lot of impatience with these things, and it was great to be forced to wait. And what I really liked about it is that because the romance itself takes so long to pay off, there's a lot of focus on the relationship and the dynamics between them independent of the romance. You see in all 3 of these books these characters learning to partner with each other and see them kind of work on specific problems that they have with each other. I think when you get the chance to see 2 characters interact that way, it reveals a lot about the relationship between them that feeds into a romance that you can bring in downstream. So even if the specific romantic moments are late, there's so much build up to them that it pays off like tremendously. It's especially great because some of these books are about assholes and you get to watch them actually change instead of having them be like transformed by love. As you might gather from all of these descriptions, these books have a lot to do with sports, which I also really enjoyed. She gets a lot just into basic training stuff that's really fun to read about, for me at least. I'm not a huge sports fan, but I like reading about how people do their jobs really, really well, and I thought that was a really fun part of this book. I was like obsessively reading these. Like, I would start reading it in the morning and I would stay up at late just to finish it the same day because it was so slow, but it was so satisfying. I just had to go to the end. So I highly recommend these books, especially if you've been wanting a change of pace romance-wise. Just as an added note, The Wall of Winnipeg does talk about abuse at several points. There are several characters who have been abused, so just keep that in mind if you are thinking about reading it. And the last book I want to talk about is The Duke I Tempted by Scarlett Peckham. This is the first book in her Secrets of Charlotte Street series, and I believe it's her debut novel. It was just published July 31st, and this book is about Poppy Cavendish, who is a botanist who's looking for enough money to basically make her nursery dreams come true. So in comes Archer, the Duke of Westmead, and he has basically hired her to decorate a ball that his sister is hosting, or his sister hires her. Anyway, the ball is at his place. He's not super excited because he is back in his ancestral home, and for a lot of angst-filled, secretive reasons that he doesn't talk about with his sister or friends or really anyone, except the darkest recesses of his soul, he's not happy with being back there. He is also hiding a secret. He has a whole submissive streak to him that he doesn't want people to know about. Poppy and Archer strike up a friendship of sorts that kind of belies the attraction they feel to each other. Then they end up forced into marriage with each other to cover up a scandal of sorts. A marriage that they both agree is going to be entirely about business. Poppy is going to get a nursery out of this, and the Duke is going to get an heir, and because they both have their own secrets and reservations, they've agreed that this is going to be the limit of their relationship. So of course they're both secretly super duper into each other, and that whole business transaction thing that they thought was going to be protecting them from feeling upset is actually causing them more angst. There's a lot of aspects to this book that I would not have expected to like. Poppy and Archer have sort of like an instant attraction to each other. Usually I like those things to be built up a little bit slower. The central conflict of this book could have also been resolved if they had just talked to each other, and that's usually a thing that annoys the shit out of me. But somehow in this book I really enjoyed how both of those aspects work together. I think especially because the conflict is all wrapped up around the fact that they both have what they want, each other, but they've created a situation where neither of them think that they can say that they can admit that. There's something really compelling about that conflict to me. I love this book so much, and I love these characters so much. I am super excited to have found another new romance author that I really love, and I'm excited to see with what she comes out next in the series, because this definitely inspired a lot of confidence in me. So that is my recent romance reading rundown. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what good romances you have been reading. If you do use Kindle Unlimited, let me know what books you've really enjoyed off of it so I can make sure to check those out. Yeah, thank you guys for watching, and bye.